Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine knowing just 3,000 words. Seems specific, right?
Hmm.
But get this. With those 3,000 words, you could understand, apparently, 95% of spoken English. 95%.
It's a pretty staggering figure when you first hear it.
It really is. For a lot of us, I think that number, 3,000 words, it still sounds like a massive undertaking, like climbing a linguistic Everest.
Definitely. We're often conditioned to think language learning means, well, tens of thousands of words, complex grammar rules drilled into us.
Right, hours and hours in classrooms or with tutors. So when our source material throws out this idea, 3,000 words for 95% comprehension, it feels almost, I don't know, too simple.
It's counterintuitive, for sure. It
Right.
sort of flies in the face of that traditional struggle narrative we associate with learning a language.
Yeah, like there's some secret shortcut that bypasses all the pain we expect. But it's a really powerful idea, isn't it?
Absolutely. The idea that there's a clear, maybe even achievable goal waiting there, and perhaps a more natural way to reach it.
So this 95% figure, it really challenges that traditional way of thinking, doesn't it?
It does, profoundly. Because the traditional pathways, the ways we've usually been told to acquire those thousands of words, well, they've always been perceived as daunting.
Daunting how?
Well, full of rote memorization, those dry vocabulary drills, endless repetition.
Oh, I remember those lists.
Exactly.
Mm.
And as our sources point out, that kind of approach, it often leads to burnout pretty quickly.
Right, you start off all excited thinking you'll be chatting away fluently.
And then you hit the wall of tedious exercises. That initial enthusiasm just gets chipped away.
That vision of effortless conversation kind of crashes into the reality of, well, boring methods.
Precisely. And this perceived difficulty, it's not just a feeling, it becomes a real psychological barrier.
Mm.
It can discourage learners before they even get close to understanding properly, let alone speaking fluently.
Yeah, the sheer volume, maybe, and just how unengaging it all feels. It can seem insurmountable. You feel frustrated, not like you're actually getting anywhere.
Exactly. Progress feels slow, if it feels like it's happening at all.
And that frustration, I mean, we've all likely encountered it, right? Or at least heard stories, maybe tried it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Those endless vocabulary lists stretching on forever, demanding hours of just memorizing words in isolation.
With no context, no real connection.
Exactly. Or the repetitive drills with online tutors, maybe, or sitting in rigid classroom settings.
Dissecting grammar rules, filling in blanks in a workbook.
Yeah. And our sources, they don't mince words, do they? They're pretty blunt about these conventional ways.
They are. The description used is stark. Slow, boring, and expensive.
Slow, boring, and expensive.
Yeah.
All three, that really hits home.
It covers all the pain points, doesn't it?
It does. Think about the financial cost, first classes, tutors, books. It adds up.
Significantly.
And then there's the time commitment, which often feels, well, unproductive maybe. You put in the hours, but...
But the results don't seem proportional to the effort.
Right. And the sheer mental drudgery of it all. It can just completely drain your motivation, can't it?
It really can. It shifts language learning from something exciting, something you want to do, into an obligation.
A chore. Exactly. And honestly, who needs more chores?
Nobody. And what's really fascinating, the reason why it feels like a chore, is that these conventional methods often fail to align with how our brains actually naturally acquire language.
How so?
Well, they heavily prioritize explicit instruction. That means, consciously learning rules, definitions, memorizing verb tables.
Like learning the theory before you even try to ride the bike.
Exactly. It prioritizes that over the organic process of understanding, which is much more implicit, more intuitive.
Okay, so our brains don't naturally work by memorizing rules first.
Not primarily for language acquisition, no. Our brains are incredible pattern-matching machines. They're designed to soak up information from context, from repetition, especially when that information is meaningful and, crucially, engaging.
Engaging. So when it feels boring.
When it feels boring, or like a chore, it basically signals to your brain this information might not be that important. And what happens then?
You forget it, retention plummets.
Precisely. There's this fundamental disconnect between the method, the boring, rule-based approach, and our natural cognitive wiring. That's why it feels like such an uphill struggle, rather than an intuitive exploration.
Like trying to learn swimming by reading a manual instead of getting in the water.
That's a great analogy. You wouldn't teach a child to walk by showing them anatomical diagrams, right?
No, you let them stand, wobble, maybe fall a bit.
Exactly. They learn through experience, through trying and gradually gaining coordination. Language is very similar.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if the old ways are slow, boring, expensive, and they're actually fighting against how our brains want to learn, what's the alternative?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it?
Is there a different path? Something simpler, more natural, maybe even effective?
Hmm.
A way to learn those 3,000 crucial words, perhaps, and actually integrate the language?
To the point where you might even start thinking in it.
Exactly. That's the dream, right? So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. This concept called comprehensible input.
Mm-hmm.
Our sources point to this as the, quote, simple solution, a potential game changer that could shift how we think about learning languages altogether.
It's about leveraging our brain's built-in abilities rather than trying to force them into unnatural patterns, making the process efficient, enjoyable, and, well, actually work.
So if the traditional ways are suboptimal, what is the fundamental way we learn language according to this idea?
It boils down to something powerful, yet remarkably simple. Our source material puts it like this. We acquire language in only one way,
Only one way.
when we understand it.
When we understand it, okay. Not when we memorize lists, not when we dissect grammar.
But when we make sense of the message, even if we don't know every single word or rule, it's about grasping the meaning.
So the primary engine isn't conscious analysis, but engaging with stuff we can mostly comprehend.
Exactly. Meaningful content that we can understand. That's the foundational principle. It moves us away from just memorizing bits and pieces towards a more organic, meaning-first approach.
Kind of like how we learned our first language without even realizing it.
Precisely. It taps into that same natural mechanism.
Okay, let's really dig into this slow, boring, and expensive label a bit more because it resonates, right? It captures that feeling of frustration so many people experience.
It really does.
Think about those vocabulary lists again. Just the sheer volume. It's overwhelming.
Like being handed a dictionary and told, memorize this.
Yeah, no story, no context, just words and translations. And you try to use them, and it feels clunky, awkward.
Forced. Unnatural. Because the words haven't been learned in a meaningful context.
So progress feels tiny, like you're wading through treacle, and the task just seems endless.
It erodes your confidence, too. You feel like you should know more after all that effort.
Absolutely. And then let's not forget the expensive part. It's not just the money, is it?
No, the financial outlay for tutors, classes, materials.
Yeah.
That's significant, of course.
But the time cost, that feels even more precious sometimes.
Agreed. Dedicating hours every day, week after week, month after month.
And still feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Still not able to just talk naturally or understand a fast conversation. That stagnation after putting so much in.
It's incredibly disheartening. It's often the point where people just say, you know what? This isn't working. I quit.
It becomes this cycle. Invest money and time, get frustrated, see slow results, lose motivation, give up.
And that cycle is precisely what needs to be disrupted if we want more people to succeed.
So why do these methods lead to such high dropout rates? You mentioned the boring aspect.
Yes, and that's deeply connected to our psychology. Our brains are fundamentally wired for things like novelty, meaning, connection. Emotional engagement is key for learning.
Things that standard drills often lack.
Completely. When learning is presented as this repetitive, context-free chore, our intrinsic motivation just tanks. It vanishes.
So the brain basically tunes out.
In a way, yes. It doesn't form strong, meaningful connections with the material. Retention suffers badly. And the drive to keep going just evaporates.
It becomes a battle of willpower rather than something you actually enjoy.
Exactly. It's a mental marathon many aren't equipped for or shouldn't have to endure. This resistance to boring, non-contextual learning. It's a huge factor that traditional teaching often ignores.
Assuming sheer effort will just push through the boredom.
Right. But our brains, especially for complex skills like language, they just don't work most efficiently that way. It's like, as you said, trying to fill a bucket with a tiny spoon when there's a perfectly good hose right there.
It's inefficient and, yeah, often painful. So what is that hose? What's this more natural, intuitive way? Let's get into comprehensible input itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the old ways are inefficient, what exactly is this simple solution our sources talk about? Comprehensible input.
Right. The core idea, again, is surprisingly straightforward.
Yeah.
We acquire language in only one way when we understand it.
Understand it, not dissect it, not memorize it. Understand the message.
Precisely. So what does that mean for you, the person learning? It means you don't need to stress about catching every single word or perfectly analyzing every grammar rule right away.
It's more about getting the overall meaning. the gist.
Exactly. Think about watching a movie in another language, maybe with subtitles on. You follow the story, right? Even if some lines are a blur.
Yeah, through the visuals, the actors' expressions, the music, the context.
Your brain uses all of that. It's a powerful pattern recognizer, constantly looking for meaning, making connections. It's like a little detective.
Trying to figure out what that new word means based on everything else happening.
Yes. And comprehensible input means the message is understandable enough. It might be slightly challenging, push you a little beyond what you already know, but you can still make sense of it overall.
So it meets you where you are, but gives you a gentle nudge forward.
That's the sweet spot. Not too easy, not frustratingly hard, just right.
It sounds much less stressful than staring at grammar tables.
It is. And what's really fascinating is how subtle this learning process is. It's not studying the way we usually think of it.
How do you mean? Less active effort.
In a way, yes. It's more like absorption, like an osmosis. When the input makes sense, your brain is quietly, almost effortlessly, soaking up the patterns, the sounds, the sentence structures.
Without you consciously trying to memorize them.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It's building this internal model of the language, piece by piece, naturally. It's very similar to how a child learns their first language.
Right. Babies aren't given vocabulary lists or grammar lessons.
No, they're just immersed in language being used around them, usually tied to real things, actions, emotions.
Like, mommy's getting juice, or look, the doggy.
Exactly. They understand the meaning being communicated, and through that understanding, the language itself just gets acquired. It's a natural, built-in process.
A process we adults often try to complicate with artificial methods.
Ironically, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We try to force it through conscious effort when our brains are already equipped for this more intuitive path.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? Makes you wonder why we strayed so far from it.
Well, sometimes the most obvious solutions are hidden in plain sight.
So true. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the source gives this brilliant, concrete example, a walkthrough that really brings it alive.
Yes, the video example.
Right. So imagine you're watching this video, someone's talking, pointing at things, making it super clear what they mean through actions and visuals.
Mm-hmm.
They might say, "Hello, guys, let's go outside." Outside. Points to the door. This is a door. Opens it. I am opening the door. Points down. These are my shoes.
Very simple, very direct, very visual.
Exactly. Then they step outside, points to the lawn. This grass has been cut. Points to another patch. This grass has not been cut. Shows the height difference.
Demonstrating the meaning physically.
Yeah. This grass is taller. It has not been cut. This grass is shorter, so it has been cut. Then maybe points to trees, lemons, a car. There is someone inside of the car. Points. Inside, maybe points to a puddle. You could also call this a pond. It's a pond of water.
So lots of repetition, clear context, visual aids.
Right. And you might not know every single word at first. Maybe beige for the dog they showed earlier, or pond is new. But you absolutely get the gist, don't you?
You do. Your brain is piecing it together from all those clues, the visuals, the actions, the repetition. You're filling in the blanks almost automatically.
And that seems to be the core of it. That's the aha moment.
It is. Because, as the source points out, even if you didn't understand every word I said, your brain is already learning through the visuals, context, and repetition.
Learning without feeling like you're studying.
Exactly. This process bypasses the need for explicit translation back to your native language or consciously thinking about grammar rules. You're building meaning directly in the new language.
Your brain is actively figuring things out based on all that rich input.
It's constantly hypothesizing. Okay, they pointed at the door and said door. That must mean door. They moved their hand like this and said opening. That must be the action. It's an active subconscious deciphering process.
Which then leads to actually acquiring the language bits you deciphered.
Precisely. It's not just teaching you words in isolation. It's teaching you how to learn words from context. That's a much more powerful, sustainable skill for fluency.
Wow. Okay. So the benefits go way beyond just picking up new vocabulary, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole package deal.
The source lists quite a few things: vocabulary, pronunciation, listening comprehension skills, grammar, and sentence structure.
All learned together, integrated, not in separate compartments.
And by far the most important, how to start thinking in English. That's the big one, isn't it?
That really is the holy grail for many learners.
And all this, the source emphasizes, happens without boring lessons and textbooks.
Which is key for motivation and sticking with it.
So you're not just memorizing facts you'll forget. You're building this intuitive feel for the language. how sentences flow naturally, how words actually sound in real situations,
How to understand people when they speak at a normal, maybe even fast pace.
and getting rid of that constant mental translation step. You know, that pause, where you're thinking in your language, then translating, then speaking.
It's exhausting and slows everything down.
Thinking in English bypasses that whole process. It frees you up. That feels like where real fluency kicks in.
Absolutely. From a cognitive perspective, thinking directly in the target language massively reduces the mental workload. Makes sense.
Less effort.
Much less effort. Translating constantly is like running two complex programs in your head simultaneously. It consumes huge amounts of energy, slows your responses, and often leads to speech that sounds, well, a bit stilted or unnatural.
Because you're forcing structures from one language onto another.
Often, yes. This comprehensible input method, though, cultivates that direct link between thought and expression in English. It dismantles the reliance on translation.
So you can just think and speak.
More fluidly, more spontaneously. That's where the real joy and confidence in using the language comes from. It's truly a game changer for feeling fluent.
Okay, so the theory makes a ton of sense. Comprehensible input, learning through understanding. We get it. The example was great. But the big question is always, how do you actually do this? How do you put it into practice in your everyday life?
Right. The theory is one thing. Making it work for you is another.
Luckily, our sources don't just leave us with the theory. They lay out a really clear, surprisingly simple 3-step blueprint.
Practical strategy.
Exactly. Designed to make comprehensible input something you can actually integrate into your daily routine consistently. Makes it actionable.
Which is crucial for any learning method to be effective long-term.
Okay, so step 1, what is it?
Step 1 is all about immersion and experience, but in an enjoyable way.
Enjoyable being the key word here.
Absolutely. The source specifically says you should watch comprehensible input videos, like the ones the creator makes, focusing on things like real-life vlogs, traveling, and adventures.
So content that's actually interesting, not just dry educational stuff.
Precisely. Content designed to be as interesting as possible, the goal being to teach you English in a fun way so that it doesn't feel like work, it doesn't feel like you're studying.
I love that. Learning without feeling like learning. So you find videos you genuinely want to watch, travel, hobbies, stories.
Whatever grabs your interest. The idea is to absorb the language through these engaging narratives and experiences, not through boring drills.
And while watching, what should you be doing? Just passively absorbing?
Well, you're absorbing, but the source suggests being a bit active too. Practice listening comprehension. Really tune your ear into the sounds, the rhythm.
Okay, actively listen. What else?
You could practice shadowing techniques.
Shadowing. Remind us what that is.
That's where you try to repeat what the speaker is saying,
Right.
almost simultaneously mimicking their pronunciation, intonation, speed, everything.
Like being their echo.
Kind of, yes. It's great for pronunciation and getting the feel for the flow of the language.
Okay, so listen actively. Maybe you try shadowing. Anything else?
And also, just watch out for sentence structure, grammar. Notice how things are put together naturally.
So observe the patterns without needing to analyze them formally.
Exactly. Learn this naturally instead of doing lessons in class. The core idea is enjoyable immersion.
Making it fun, making it natural, making it stick because you actually like doing it.
That principle, making learning fun, natural, and way less boring, is absolutely fundamental for keeping people engaged over the long haul.
Because if you enjoy it, you'll keep doing it. Consistency becomes easier.
Effortless, almost. It stops being a discipline issue and becomes something you look forward to. Plus, by practicing listening with engaging stuff, you're really honing your ability to understand real-world English.
Not just the slow, careful English you sometimes hear in lessons.
Right. You get used to natural speed, reductions, different accents. And shadowing, as you practice it, builds that muscle memory for speaking.
You start to internalize the rhythm and sound patterns.
Exactly. And by just observing the grammar in action, your brain starts building that intuitive understanding of how sentences work without needing the explicit rules. It's holistic.
Okay, step 1. Enjoyable immersion with active listening and maybe shadowing. What's step 2?
Step 2 is about reinforcing and clarifying what you've absorbed using some smart tech.
Bringing in the tools, like AI.
Precisely. The source mentions using a specific ChatGPT prompt, which they provide, designed to help you reinforce what you learned in the video.
Reinforce how? What does the prompt do?
It's pretty versatile. It can give you definitions for new words you encountered in the video.
Okay, standard dictionary stuff.
But it goes further. It offers multiple example sentences for that word. And importantly, not just in the present tense.
Oh.
It gives examples in the past, present, and future tenses.
Ah, so you see how the word actually works in different contexts and time frames? That's useful.
Very. And then it can generate many quizzes to ensure you understood everything about that word.
Quizzes like multiple choice.
It could be,
Yeah.
but potentially more varied fill in the blanks, asking you to use the word yourself, explaining nuances. It provides that immediate feedback loop.
Testing your recall, not just recognition. Okay, that sounds powerful for making things stick.
It is. And the really valuable part here is the customizability.
How so?
Well, you can ask for specific verb tenses if you want to focus there. You can choose how you get explanations only in English, maybe?
Or English plus your native language.
Or just your native language if you're starting out or feeling stuck. It adapts to your comfort level.
That's really flexible, personalized learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also acts like a personalized tutor because you can ask it any questions or any confusions you have about anything in English.
So if something in the video or even the explanation didn't quite click, you can just ask.
Yes, you get instant, tailored feedback. This dynamic interaction is key for consolidating learning. You clarify doubts immediately, explore things deeper. It turns passive watching into active, reinforced understanding.
It's like having a patient expert on call 247.
Pretty much.
Okay, so step 1 is immerse and enjoy. Step 2 is reinforce and clarify with AI. What's the third step?
The third step is about solidifying everything for long-term retention. The source calls this one more optional, but highly recommended,
Optional but recommended. Why?
especially if you don't have the chance to speak English a lot, which is true for many learners, right? You learn, but don't get daily practice.
Yeah, that's a common problem. So what's the recommendation?
Using an SRS software. SRS stands for Spaced Repetition Software.
Spaced repetition. Like flashcards, but smarter.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Software like Anki is mentioned. You put the words or concepts you learned into the software,
Okay.
and the software uses an algorithm to show you the word again just before you're statistically likely to forget it.
Ah, so it prompts you to recall it at the optimal moment for strengthening memory.
Precisely. It's incredibly efficient because you focus your review time only on the things you're weakest on, the things you're about to forget.
Instead of just reviewing everything randomly or all at once.
Right. It intelligently schedules your reviews to embed the information deep into your long-term memory. It's designed to fight the natural forgetting process.
That makes sense, especially if you lack speaking practice to keep words active. What if SRS software isn't your thing?
The source acknowledges that. It says if you don't want to use SRS, you can just simply review the words on your own time whenever you feel you need to revise them.
So a more manual approach, but still emphasizing the need for review.
Yes, the key principle, whether using software or not, is intentional periodic review to prevent that natural memory decay. Step 3 is about making sure what you learned stays learned.
Turning comprehension into competence that lasts.
Exactly. This strategic review, this active recall at spaced intervals, is what combats the forgetting curve that affects all learning.
The forgetting curve, where you naturally forget things over time if you don't revisit them.
Precisely. Actively pulling that information back from memory, whether prompted by SRS or your own schedule, strengthens the neural pathways.
Making the knowledge more permanent and easier to access next time.
Yes. It transforms that temporary recognition, oh yeah, I saw that word, into true mastery, where the word is just there when you need it for understanding or speaking.
So it ensures all that enjoyable input from step 1 doesn't just go in one ear and out the other.
It ensures it becomes a permanent, usable part of your English ability.
Okay, this 3-step process sounds logical, practical, and actually quite appealing.
Yeah.
But does it work? How effective is it compared to, say, sitting in a classroom?
Well, this is where the source makes a pretty bold claim. A really extraordinary claim, actually.
Oh, what is it?
It states that comprehensible input videos like this are 4 times more effective than traditional learning methods.
4 times. That's huge.
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
To put it in concrete terms, the source suggests that my 10 to 15-minute vlog is worth up to 1 hour of classroom instruction.
Wow. So a short, engaging video delivers the same learning punch as a full hour of traditional lessons.
According to this source, yes. A 4-fold increase in efficiency.
Think about what that means. You could make real progress in just short bursts each day, even if you're super busy.
It makes consistency much more achievable. That feeling of I don't have time starts to fade if 15 minutes can be as productive as an hour used to be.
And crucially, it's mentioned that these resources are often completely free.
Right. So 4 times the efficiency at potentially zero financial cost.
That really feels like the shortcut people look for, not cutting corners on learning, but cutting the inefficiency, the cost, the boredom.
It's about maximizing the effectiveness of the time you do spend. It democratizes access to effective learning in a really powerful way.
Anyone with an internet connection could potentially leverage this.
Exactly. And that fourfold effectiveness claim,
Hmm.
if we extrapolate, it's genuinely revolutionary.
How so? Beyond individual learners.
Well, it challenges the entire structure of how we often deliver education. It suggests that deep, effective learning might not always require expensive institutions or constant expert handholding.
But rather relies on finding or creating the right kind of input. Intelligent, accessible, comprehensible input.
Precisely. It empowers individuals globally, regardless of their economic situation or location. It suggests effective learning can be far more accessible and intuitive than we've traditionally believed.
Really flips the script on learning having to be hard and costly to be good.
It does. Sometimes the most effective path is also the most natural and enjoyable one.
And that enjoyment factor, the psychological side, seems just as important as the efficiency numbers.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
The source keeps coming back to this. The method is designed to make learning fun, natural, and way, way less boring.
Ensuring it doesn't feel like work, it doesn't feel like you're studying.
That psychological shift is profound. When it feels like a pastime, like watching interesting videos or going on a virtual trip.
You're naturally drawn to do it. You don't have to force yourself as much.
Exactly. Intrinsic motivation takes over. Consistency becomes almost automatic because you want to engage with it.
And that sustained engagement, day after day, is what leads to real, long-term progress.
It transforms the whole journey from a dreaded chore into something genuinely enjoyable, maybe even adventurous. You're cultivating a positive relationship with the language itself.
Not just battling through textbooks. Now, one question people might have is, does this work for everyone? Like beginners, advanced learners?
That's a really important question. Can one method really serve all levels?
Yeah, because a beginner needs different things than someone nearly fluent, right?
They do, but the core principle, comprehensible input, is inherently adaptable.
How does that work?
Because comprehensible is relative to the learner. The key is finding input that is just slightly beyond your current level, but still understandable through context.
Ah, so the type of input changes, but the principle stays the same.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
For a beginner, comprehensible input might be those very simple videos we described, slow speech, clear visuals, basic vocabulary.
Like the opening the door example.
Precisely. For an intermediate learner, it might be vlogs with more complex stories, slightly faster speech, more nuanced words.
Maybe following a travel series or a documentary.
Right. And for an advanced learner, it could be podcasts like this one, perhaps, or watching debates, movies without subtitles, reading articles on complex topics.
Where the rich context helps them grasp subtle idioms, cultural nuances, complex grammar they haven't mastered yet.
Yes. As long as the input is mostly understandable, but still offers something new to learn from context, it works. It provides the ideal challenge for growth at any stage.
So it's a universally applicable principle, making it a scalable tool all the way to fluency.
Which is why the source confidently states, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, these videos will help you become fluent and should be a part of your daily study routine.
It grows with you. It's not a method you outgrow.
Exactly. It fosters that sense of continuous learning, continuous discovery.
It really sounds like it turns learning into an ongoing exploration rather than a task with an endpoint.
That's a perfect way to put it. It keeps the curiosity alive. #Gadgetro.
Okay, so we've really taken a deep dive today into this fascinating concept of comprehensible input. And at its heart, it's such a powerful, almost deceptively simple idea, isn't it? That we acquire language best not by painful memorization, but just by understanding what we hear and see.
Letting our brain's natural pattern matching abilities do the heavy lifting.
Exactly, and it's backed by that practical 3-step strategy we discussed. Step 1. Immerse yourself in enjoyable, comprehensible videos, stuff you actually want to watch.
Making learning feel less like work.
Step 2. Use those smart AI tools, like the ChatGPT prompt mentioned, to reinforce what you learned, clarify doubts, and get personalized feedback.
Solidifying that initial understanding.
And step 3, the optional but recommended one. Use tools like spaced repetition software or just disciplined self-review to lock that learning into your long-term memory.
Ensuring it sticks around for good.
It really feels like more than just a technique. It feels like a whole different philosophy of learning, more effective, definitely more enjoyable, and honestly, way more accessible for everyone.
It really does represent a significant paradigm shift. And thinking about it,
Yeah.
this journey into comprehensible input for language learning, it kind of sparks a broader thought, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if the most effective way to learn something as complex as language is through understanding meaningful input rather than rote drills or just memorizing facts,
Yeah.
what does that imply for learning? Well, anything complex.
Ah, you mean beyond languages, like science, history, professional skills.
Exactly. Could the key to unlocking deep knowledge and skill in any field lie in finding ways to make the information truly comprehensible, to present it in a way that leverages understanding and context rather than just demanding memorization?
Removing the perceived work and focusing on sparking that genuine curiosity through understanding.
Could that be a more powerful engine for learning across the board? It makes you wonder if we've sometimes made learning harder than it needs to be in many areas by focusing too much on instruction and not enough on comprehension.
That is a powerful thought. Really makes you reconsider how we approach teaching and learning in general. So for everyone listening, as you continue your own learning journey, maybe it's English, maybe it's something else entirely, maybe consider this.
What if the secret isn't just about putting in more hours or trying harder in the traditional sense?
What if the real secret to truly getting knowledgeable, truly mastering something, is simply about finding the right kind of input? Input that's compelling, engaging, and most importantly, that truly makes sense to you.